morning, learners. I am Dr. Subodh Kesarwani, a lecturer in School of Management Studies. Welcome you all. The topic which we are going to consider today is economic theory. Let's take one example. A has a surplus of product X. B is deficit in product X. What the market is doing, putting A and B into together. And how this market is going to govern, this is all about economics. We have with us Dr. Madhulika. She is a faculty in School of Management Studies. She is going to speak on law of diminishing marginal and equimarginal utility.
Thank you, Dr. Subodh.
Thank you.
As Dr. Subodh told, I am going to deliver the lecture Law of Diminishing Marginal and Equimarginal Utility. Man is a social animal. He lives in a society and takes an active part in society. So he has some need to meet two ends together. Without need, we are helpless. There is a very famous idiom like necessity is the mother of invention. So if there is necessity, there is the way to meet the invention. So therefore we can say without necessity we are like animal. Of course animal have also some basic need. So therefore we can say in Marshall's language, according to Marshall, man is affected by the society and he himself affects the society. Today we discuss the law of diminishing marginal utility and equimarginal utility. There is a necessity for existence, necessity for comfort, necessity for luxury. So every person fulfills first of all necessity for comfort, then necessity for existence, then necessity for comfort, and lastly necessity for luxury. For fulfilling all these things, person requires money, goods or services according to their circumstances or whatever he may require. So basically economics can be divided into 5 parts. Number 1, consumption. Number 2, production. Number 3, exchange. Number 4, distribution. Number 5, entrepreneur. In consumption, our need can be fulfilled by the production. So whatever we produce, we will all not consumed, and everything is not possible to produce. So there is a need for exchange and distribution. If exchange and distribution came in our life, the question of value was arise to meet the problem. So here comes currency, money and precious item like gold, coin and stones, precious stone. Because we cannot produce everything, and whatever we produce we will all not consume. So therefore there is the need for exchange and distribution. This system is known as barter system. In this session we only discuss the consumption part. The law of diminishing marginal and equimarginal utility is very important part of it. Whatever person consumes or uses, it is called consumption, and every consumption have some utility. Utility may be positive, utility may be zero, utility may be negative. For example, if a person wants to buy a shirt, that means he buy a shirt and loses the money. but in favor of seller. Seller sells the shirt and gets the money. Here two aspects comes out. Number one, consumer utilizes his money and gets the maximum satisfaction, and seller gets positive satisfaction from selling the item or commodity. So the relationship between production and consumption is clear here. Now our discussion is the law of equimarginal utility and diminishing marginal utility. So utility is the want satisfying capacity. Utility cannot be measured, but up to some extent it can be measured, because it is a mental satisfaction. Whatever we use or whatever we get is called utility. So utility is a expected satisfaction, and satisfaction is a realized utility. There comes out two question arises with the regard of consumer behavior. Number one, why does consumer demand goods and services? Number two, how can consumer spend his limited income? And they may get maximum satisfaction from both of it. So this approach is known as equilibrium, and it is called an equilibrium, and this system is also called an cardinal measurement of equilibrium. Now according to Marshall, the additional benefit which a person derives from a given increase of his stock of a thing diminishes with every increase in the stock that he already has. In other words, the law states that the marginal utility derived by a consumer from the consumption of a commodity goes on diminishing as he consumes more and more of it. Other thing remains same. Now we would consider the concept of utility analysis and their relationship. There are three concepts of utility. Number one, initial utility. Number two, marginal utility. Number three, total utility. First of all, initial utility. Initial utility means the utility derived from the first unit of commodity is a initial utility. For example, a first loaf of bread is a initial utility. It is always positive. Next is marginal utility. Marginal utility means addition made to total utility by the marginal unit is marginal utility. Now the definition of Chapman. According to Chapman, marginal utility is the addition made to total utility by consuming one more unit of the commodity. Let us take an example. Suppose Mr. A is hungry and take a loaf of bread. So first of all, his marginal utility, he gets marginal utility is 35. In his second loaf of bread, his marginal utility is 30. In third loaf of bread, he gets marginal utility in 25, and gradually it is decreasing. So at one point in his sixth loaf of bread, his marginal utility would be 0, because he has been fully satisfied and he does not required to take any additional unit. Now the total utility means the sum of utility acquired by the consumer, whatever he gets, means 35 plus 30 plus 25 plus 15 plus 5 is equal to 110. This is our previous example. Next is average utility. Average utility means total utility divided by number of items, that is average utility. Now students, look at the table. You will be more understand from this table. Suppose Mr. A is hungry and he takes a loaf of bread. In this table we have 4 columns. In first column, number of loaf is given. In second column, marginal utility is there. In third column, average utility is given, and in fourth column, total utility is there. Mr. X takes a first loaf of bread. He gets marginal utility in 35 units, and total utility is also 35 units. When he takes second loaf of bread, his marginal utility is 30 units, but the total utility is 65 units. How it is come 65 units? We already discussed the definition of total utility. What is the definition? Definition is the sum of utility acquired by the consumer is total utility. So here 35 unit plus 30 unit, it comes out 65 unit, that is total utility. In his third loaf of bread, he gets 25 unit of marginal utility and 90 unit of total utility. In his fourth bread, he gets 15 unit of marginal utility and 105 is total utility. If you see the marginal utility is gradually decreasing, but if you see the total utility gradually increasing. So Mr. A takes a sixth loaf of bread and his marginal utility is 0, and his total utility is maximum, that is 110. At the time of taking sixth loaf of bread, after the taking sixth loaf of bread, he has been fully satisfied. That means he does not require to take any additional loaf of bread. But Mr. A would take any additional loaf of bread. That means he would take 7th unit or 7th loaf of bread. His marginal utility shows the negative result. That means the marginal utility is -5, and total utility also decreasing. That is 105. So first of all, marginal utility is maximum and gradually it is decreasing. But the total utility, if we see the total utility is minimum and gradually it is increasing up to the maximum point. In this sixth loaf of bread, he does not require to take any additional loaf of bread. Now the average utility, if we see the average utility, so we already discussed the definition of all average utility. Average utility means total utility divided by number of items. So in this example, the total in first loaf of bread, the total utility is 35 and number of loaf is 1. So 35 divided by 1, it comes out 35. In his second, that is 65, that is 35 plus 30 is equal to 65, and average utility is equal to total utility divided by number of utility. So 65 divided by 2, it is 32.5, and third 90 divided by 3 is equal to 30, and the process is going on up to the 7th loaf of bread. If we see the average utility, so it is like a marginal utility. Means First of all, average utility is also maximum, then gradually it is increasing. So what we will find, the when marginal utility is maximum, at the time of marginal utility is maximum, total utility is minimum. Marginal utility decreases, total utility increases. When marginal utility is 0, total utility is maximum or constant or point of saturation. This is the saturation point or maximum satisfaction point. When marginal utility shows the negative result, average utility decreases, total utility decreases, and average utility also decreases. Now look at the diagram from the graphical table. In this diagram, in x-axis we have taken number of loaves, in y-axis we have taken total utility, marginal utility, average utility all together. In this graph, red line shows the marginal utility, yellow line shows the average utility, green line shows the total utility. When Mr. A takes a first loaf of bread, his marginal utility is maximum, that is 35. In his second loaf of bread, his marginal utility is 30 units. In his third loaf of bread, his marginal utility is 25. So, if you see the marginal utility, it is continuously decreasing, or you can say it is gradually decreasing up to the 6th unit. In his 6th unit, the marginal utility is 0, or you can say Mr. A has been fully satisfied and he does not require to take any additional unit or any additional loaf of bread. If Mr. A would take another, the marginal utility shows the negative result. Next is the total utility. First of all, total utility is minimum. The green line shows the total utility. So first of all, total utility shows the minimum when Mr. A was taking a first loaf of bread, and gradually it is increasing up to maximum of 6th loaf of bread. In 6th loaf of bread, this is the maximum point, or you can say this is the maximum satisfaction point or saturation point. If Mr. A would take another loaf of bread, total utility also decreases. Now, the average utility, what about the average utility? Average utility also decreases. That means, first of all, average utility is maximum, then it is gradually decreasing like marginal utility. So it is clear here now that if marginal utility is maximum, total utility is minimum. When marginal utility is 0, total utility is maximum. When marginal utility is decreasing, total utility or marginal utility shows the negative result, total utility also decreasing. So this is the graphical presentation. Now, marginal utility can be positive, marginal utility can be 0, or marginal utility can be negative. When marginal utility can be positive, at the time of positive, suppose consumer consumes a additional unit of commodity, and he does not, and still he does not satisfied, and he will take continuously taking of commodity. So the marginal utility shows the positive result. 0 marginal utility means when consumer has been fully satisfied and he does not require to take any additional commodity. That means consumer's marginal utility is 0. Negative marginal utility means consumer has been fully satisfied and he does not require to take any additional unit of commodity. But if he would take any additional unit of commodity, the marginal utility shows the negative result. Now, we would discuss the relationship between the marginal utility and total utility. When marginal utility is positive, total utility increases. When marginal utility is 0, total utility is maximum. When marginal utility is negative, total utility decreases. Now, there are some assumptions of the law. The law is stated on the condition that other thing being equal, that means law is based on some assumption. Our first assumption is uniform quality and size of commodity. At the time of taking commodity, the commodity should be in uniform size, or you can say at the time of during the taking of commodity, the commodity should be in same size and same quality. Next is suitable quantity of consumption. At the time of consuming the commodity should be in suitable size, or it should be sufficient size. For example, a full spoon of tea instead of a cup. Next assumption is consumption within the same time. During the taking of commodity should be in the same time, or we can say during the, there is no time gapping during the taking of commodity. No change in mental condition of the consumer during the consumer. Law already stated that other thing being equal. So, at the time of taking commodity, there should be no change in mental condition of the consumer. It means the consumer's mental level should remain same. Next point is no change in fashion or taste. There should not be change in fashion or taste during the taking of commodity. Or next point is no change in price of commodity or its substitute. At the time of taking commodity, there should not be change in price or its substitute, because law already, we discussed that law already stated that other thing being equal. So, at the time of taking commodity, there should not be change in the price of commodity, or similarly like substitutes. Apart from assumption, there are some exception also. Number 1, rare and curious thing. Law does not apply in rare and curious thing. Rare and curious thing, for example, old coin and rare paintings. Goods of display. Though goods of display means those commodities which are displaying by the consumer in society, or you can say which are the prestigious commodity in the society, is displaying of goods. So, for example, like gold jewelry, diamond jewelry and platinum jewelry. It is the goods of display, and law does not apply in this particular rule. In our third point is consumption of public good. Law does not apply on consumption of public goods, means goods which are more demanded by the masses, like mobile phone. Mobile phone has great utility by their users. So, day by day it is increasing. So, consumption of goods is the exception of the law. Intoxicants. Intoxicants means taking the alcohol. At the time of taking alcohol, consumer's mental status should not remain same. So, at that point, law does not apply, because he should not be able to judge anything. In fifth point, good books or poetry. Good books or poetry create great interest and give mental satisfaction. So law does not apply in good books or poetry. First time consumption of commodity. First time consumption of commodity means when consumer takes a commodity in his life first time, so he wants to use again and again. That is why this is the limitation of the law. Now this topic is finished now. Now we will discuss our next topic, that is law of equimarginal utility. Law of equimarginal utility is also known as law of maximum satisfaction. This law was first propounded by the French engineer Mr. H. Grosson. So that this law is also known as Grosson's second law. Basically, consumer needs maximum satisfaction from the different commodity, because everyone cannot be satisfied by taking of one commodity, and everyone needs for different commodity for different purposes, and money is limited for everyone. That is the big problem, but the problem solves this law. Law implies that if a person has a limited income and gets a maximum satisfaction from different commodity, at that time he would decide, first of all he would decide to his priority, what is his priority, and then after he spends his money in commodity one by one and gets a same satisfaction from all the commodities. According to Marshall, if a person has a thing which he can put to several uses, he will distribute it among these uses in such a way that he was the same marginal utility in all. For example, suppose Mr. A has a limited income rupees 2000 and wants to get maximum satisfaction from house rent, food, cloth, money, food, cloth, education, health. So first of all he would decide to his priority. So what is his priority? His priority is house rent and food. If you see the utility of money, it would be differ from commodity to commodity. But if you see the utility in terms of satisfaction, it would be same from all the commodity. Let us take a numerical example. In this table, we have 3 columns. First column is utility of money in terms of rupees. Next column is marginal utility of house rent in units. Third column is marginal utility of food in units. Mr. A has a limited income rupees 1000 and he wants to spend in house rent and food. So first of all, first 100 rupees he spent in house rent. If you see the table, in the first 100 rupees he spent in house rent and gets a marginal utility in 20 units. In his second 100 rupees he spent in food and gets a marginal utility of 17 units. Now his priority will again change. In his third 100 rupees, means 300 rupees, he again spent in house rent and gets a marginal utility of 16 unit. Now he again switch over in food, so his 400 rupees he spent in food and gets a marginal utility of 13 unit. So the process is going on. If you see the last 200 rupees, that is 900 and 1000 rupees, his priority is house rent, because and he spent rupees 900 in house rent and gets a marginal utility is 4, and another 1000 rupees he spent again in house rent and gets a marginal utility in 2 unit. If you see in terms of the rupees, it is differ, means 600 rupees he spent in house rent and rupees 400 he spent in food. So it is differ from money, but if you see the utility in terms of satisfaction, it would be same. That means 600 rupees is equal to 400 rupees is equal to maximum satisfaction, or you can say he will get, or he gets the same satisfaction from house rent and food. Now look at the graph. In this graph, in x-axis we have taken utility of money spent, in y-axis the utility of house rent and food. Red line shows the marginal utility of house rent in units. Yellow line shows the marginal utility of food in unit. Rupees 12 unit to be consumed as a parallel straight line of x-axis. The gain utility shows under the colored area under the marginal utility curve. Similarly, the loss of utility shows under the colored area of blue shows the loss of marginal utility of food. Now there are some limitations of this law. In this law, in this limitation, number 1, consumer are not fully rational. The law already stated that consumer are always fully rational, but it is not always true, because sometimes consumer are biased by their previous experience, and it may be possible their circumstances. So consumer are not fully rational at the time of deciding his priorities. Number 2, consumer is not calculative. Law stated that consumer are always calculative at the time of deciding his priority, but it is not true, because sometimes he influences by some fashion or taste or maybe other reason. The third point is non-availability of certain goods. The limitation is the non-availability of certain goods, means sometimes goods are not available in the market due to many reasons, like political disorder or strike, or it may be possible that goods are out of market. So at that time consumer wants to store the commodity in their home, so that his priority would be changed. At that time this limitation is applicable. Influences of fashion, custom and habits. Sometime by these fashion, custom and habits, consumer are not deciding their priorities, so that the limitation is also there. Tastes and preferences are not constant. Consumer taste and preferences does not remain same, because it may be possible due to his circumstances, or it may be possible his income would be increase or decrease, so that his taste or preferences would also be changes. Next is, and last point is, change in income and prices. Consumer income may be changed, or you can say consumer incomes would be changed. It may be increasing or decreasing. In that case, consumers' priority would also be changed according to their income. And similarly, prices also there. If prices increases or decreases, consumers' priority would also be changes. Now, some assumptions are also be there. The first assumption is, number 1, cardinal measurement of utility is possible. In this law, the cardinal measurement of utility is possible. We already discussed this method, or we already discussed the traditional approach, which is called cardinal measurement of utility. Next assumption is marginal utility, money remains same. Earlier we discussed that other thing being equal, so that the law implies marginal utility of money remains constant. Our next point is income of consumer is fixed and remain constant, or the consumer has a limited amount to spend. Fourth point is fashion, taste and preferences remain constant. Law stated that other thing being equal, so that consumers at the time of deciding his priority, consumers' fashion, taste and preferences should not be changed. It should be remains constant. Next point is price of commodity remains constant. The law assumed that at the time of deciding priority of the consumer, the price of commodity should be fixed or should remain constant. Commodity are divisible in a small unit. We can divide the commodity in a small unit. Next assumption is consumer is rational, that he wants to maximize his satisfaction. Earlier we already discussed that consumer always wants get maximum satisfaction from different commodity. That is why law assume that at the time of deciding his priority, consumer is always rational, so that he can get maximum satisfaction from all the commodities. Next point is consumer takes place at a given time period. And last point is the utility of different commodity, of different goods are independent. That is, the goods are neither complementary or substitutes for any one. Now our topic is finished, but students, you must remember by heart some technical terminology of the topic. Utility. We already discussed the meaning of utility. What is utility? Utility is expected satisfaction, and expected satisfaction is the realized utility. So, but in technical terms, utility means the want satisfying capacity of a commodity, the expected satisfaction from a commodity. Next is marginal utility. What is marginal utility? Marginal utility means addition made to total utility by the marginal unit. But in technical terms, it is the utility of the last unit of a commodity. It is the addition to the total utility on account of the last unit of commodity. Now the total utility. What is the total utility? Total utility means sum of utility acquired by the consumer, whatever he gets. But in technical terms, it is the sum of utility derived from all the units of a commodity consumed. Next is average utility. Average utility means the total utility divided by the number of items. But in technical term, it is the total utility by the number of units of a commodity. Now, law of diminishing marginal utility. We already discussed the law of diminishing marginal utility, means the principle according to which a given want can be satisfied fully, and therefore the marginal utility of a commodity keeps falling as more of it is acquired. Disutility. Students, we did not discuss the disutility, but you must know the meaning of disutility. Disutility means the negative marginal utility, means the term denotes that the consumption of the commodity under the consideration leads to loss of satisfaction and therefore a reduction in total utility. Cardinal measurement. Cardinal measurement means traditional measurement. It is the measurement in absolute term or numerical unit. It is also known as traditional approach. Ordinal measurement, the arrangement of utility amount in ascending or descending order. Here, between any two utility, it is known which more, but it is known how much more. And lastly, law of equimarginal utility. The law states that a rational consumer tries to distribute his total expenditure on different commodities in such a way that the marginal utility derived per rupee of expenditure from all commodities are equal. Now, students, I quickly finish or I quickly sum up my whole lecture. We discussed two topics: the law of marginal diminishing utility, and second is the law of equimarginal utility. Law of marginal utility means the expected utility, and expected utility is realized utility. There are three types of utility. Marginal utility. Marginal utility means addition utility to the total utility made by the marginal unit. Initial utility means first unit derived by the utility is the initial utility, and the total utility means the utility sum of the utility acquired by the consumer is the total utility. The relationship between marginal and total utility is when marginal utility is maximum, total utility is minimum. When marginal utility is 0, total utility is maximum. When marginal utility is decreasing, total utility is also decreasing. Equimarginal utility means person wants maximum satisfaction in different commodities and he has a limited income. So the law solves this problem, that first of all person would decide his priority and then he spend his limited income in different commodity and gets a maximum satisfaction. Thank you, students.